mistakes to learn. You learn by your mistakes, and nobody teaches you that really at school or college. You're trying always to jump through hoops and to meet certain grades and to get certain levels of qualification. And actually, sometimes you have to do something that is actually just goes wrong, and that's when you learn. And I try really hard to encourage people when I'm teaching the cut to be free as they can to cut things that might actually completely mess up, because in messing up they may discover something completely unexpected and new. Because that's a lot of my most successful garments were complete mess ups.
What's the best way to sort of explain why it's useful to understand a form of cutting that is lateral thinking? It's about, being freehand and free form. What's valuable about that for people who are interested in making things?
I think for a start, it's good to learn something that's quite freehand and which doesn't. If mistakes are made, maybe those mistakes become good things, not bad things. And so to learn a technique and a way of making something where your mistakes can actually become successes is, from a waste point of view, a very useful thing. It also can help designers. If people already have learned cutting before, then at certain points they might be given deadlines where they have to come up with this design or that design. If they know another way of going about making a shape, then it gives them another string to their bow so they can approach the problem from a different direction. And so it is quite different to other cutting. It's very fast to learn, but also people can learn it from all sorts of different ages. Even if you know nothing about pattern cutting and you've never made a garment in your life, you can make a garment within a few hours that is very sculptural looking, that could look good on the catwalk at London or Paris Fashion Week or wherever, just because it's a method that really levels people down. Whether you're a teacher or a school kid, it can bring you onto the same level. And I think that's quite empowering for people who want to kind of go back and rediscover what it was they first loved about cutting and making and creating things in the first place. It's a bit like exploring new things, being a bit of a test pilot for things where you don't know exactly where they might go, and that excitement of discovering and saying like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and oh, that it does that, and those unknowns are kind of quite intriguing and beautiful to go through. And luckily subtraction cutting is quite quick, so you can make things very quickly, so your attention span is held, and I guess that's how I would say it to people. But it's just about making things quick that are, if they go wrong, maybe that's a good thing.
Recently somebody gave me a book by a cartoonist named Linda Barry, and in it she sort of writes about how being a creative person, approaching creativity is something that we all do as children. And when we, as children, whether we're drawing or doing whatever, the objects that we are playing with sort of play back at us. And the other
thing that's really it easily becomes lost when you've got deadlines, and when you're sort of like when you get into jobs and whether it's a college deadline or an industry deadline, it can kill enjoyment quite quickly when you're having to produce things. And if there's a way of making things that can be playful and very fast and useful from a practical point of view, then I think that's a good skill to learn, making things quite easily.
Well, the way that I was thinking about subtraction cutting is that it's sort of like the same equivalent when you are in a writing workshop and they say, just stop thinking about what you're going to write and just write. Or, if you're in an art class and your instructor tells you, just don't worry about the good lines and the bad lines, just try to express how it feels, and that maybe the value...
All of those things are quite... I love the sound of that, but it's actually quite difficult to clear your mind. Don't think of something, or just follow the lines. When you're schooled into approaching something in a particular way, and it's quite difficult to sort of like unwind yourself from that and to be that open-minded. I think this technique, is structured enough to allow people to learn a set of rules and then to kind of like attempt something that's, they think they're doing something very logical and they end up doing something very illogical, and it's that leap between something that's 2D and 3D it's like a leap into the unknown. You just don't know what it's going to do. It's a sort of like a moment of enlightenment a bit, that when people make their first subtraction garment, they kind of think they know what they're going to do, but they end up doing something that is totally not what they expected. And sometimes it works really nicely and sometimes it does go wrong. But I just love that moment where people can actually see it happen, and I can't really explain or say what that, define what that moment is, or...
It's a sense of being able to play with your materials, a sense of playfulness, I feel like.
Yeah.
No matter what, particular person you are, whether you have sewed before or you've gone to fashion school or you're a working fashion designer, you're self-taught or whatever, I think we all sort of struggle with that, trying to do only good things and not make mistakes.
Yeah.
You are trying very hard to create something that someone will buy, or something that is provoking, or there's so much intent and logic and ambition wrapped up in that you can't get yourself to the point where you're like, I'm just going to make things for no reason, It's hard to get that. I think people call it writer's block.
I think a lot of people in fashion and in the arts generally are attracted to people who come up with ideas that are quite irreverent, or that they're breaking certain rules and they're coming from a slightly left field direction, because at the time when they were making those things, they weren't really thinking about trying to please. They're being a bit rebellious perhaps, or they're kind of just sticking to their techniques and their guns. But then as soon as they become successful and as soon as they get praised and people want more and more of those designs, then they lose that essence of that rebelliousness, or that ability to work in a way that's playful and not fearing whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And so they end up all wanting to just please people and to do the right thing, because that's the way you make money and that's the way you get press and headlines. Unfortunately, in fashion, it doesn't work that way, because fashion then changes. There's these sudden moments of great waves of change where something that's so fashionable and so of the moment, you think they're going to be there forever, but nothing is there forever in fashion. It kind of just suddenly goes out. Like, some people might love Lady Gaga at the moment and want to die for her and love her style, but in a few years' time, they will look at that and think, what's that about? And that you'll know that's going to happen, because it always happens in fashion.
I sort of feel like, as a creative person myself, I don't know how to describe it. I'm on this journey where I'm trying to figure out what my thing is. Do you know what I mean? When did you sort of realize that, subtraction cutting is your thing, and you add the professor to your name?
It's a bit. I feel sometimes it's a bit like being in a band or something, where you have a hit song where people, they like that method or that technique, or they might like a particular song, and so they want the band to sing it over and over again. But then the band kind of gets tired of singing that song, and they want to invent new songs, and release new albums. But the audience always wants, to hear that particular song that's the hit favourite. And so I find that a little bit with subtraction cutting. I had to teach a certain elementary way of, what is subtraction cutting to people who don't know about it. But actually, I want to escape it. I want to kind of do other stuff and try and advance it in more unusual ways. But people still want to kind of know the basics, so I've got to keep going back to that moment in time, and keep going to different places where people are asking me, what is subtraction cutting? What is subtraction cutting? And there's always going to be an audience of people who are going to want to know, and there's also going to be people who are fans of it who want to hear it again. But there may be a point in time where I don't want to sing it anymore. I don't want to, I don't want to tell people anymore that I'm going to have to think, you ask somebody else, ask other. That's why I'm trying to teach teachers as well as students, because I don't want it to just be me teaching subtraction cutting. I want tutors to take it in their own direction, students to take it in their own direction, and to feel that it's theirs, and to make money from it, to make, expand it, take it where it needs to go. That's a really beautiful thing to see when somebody shows me subtraction cutting in a way that I didn't think it could do that. that's a really lovely thing for me. The professor bit came from, I was offered the position of starting up a new fashion course in the UK, and at a university that didn't have one, and that was a real challenge back in 2004, and I became the youngest professor in the UK, and that was kind of my academic side perhaps taking over my design side for a few years. But it fluctuates back and forwards between myself am I a designer or am I a teacher? And I can't really separate them from each other now, because people are always asking me how techniques work, and because they ask me, my design is all about challenging techniques and how they work, and so it's about, I feel like I'm a student still. I'm still learning from the people the audience that I teach it to, because their response takes it in so many interesting and diverse directions. So you saying that you like trying to find out what your thing is, maybe you never find what that thing is, because it's always expanding and advancing, and really want to know what your thing is, like maybe your thing is the thing they write on your gravestone, that's what you get praised for. Long here.
Whatever you get remembered for.
You don't want to find it yet.
Okay, well, let's take that a little further. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I really do appreciate that you are coming to Toronto and to be able to experience this in person. It's not something that I ever expected, and knowing how ephemeral things are, it's something that I'm really delighted about. But
I'm so grateful you were able to help. I mean, it's so nice that we've talked for some time online, and you've been so supportive, and I've been interested in your work, and then because I've done a tour of America twice now, but I really wanted to do Canada because I've never been there. And then you're in Canada, it just seemed your involvement is really sort of connected and facilitated things. And so it's really nice to be able to come to Toronto and for you to have smoothed that process, and it's exciting.
Sweet.
Because I've never been to Canada in my life,
So beyond subtraction cutting, what are you longing for, Julian?
I don't know. Beyond subtraction cutting, there's so much. I mean, because I get tired of the terminology of the word subtraction cutting even. To me, it's just a way of thinking, it's a way of being and acting. And I think what I want to do more is just show that cutting and making things is a human process. It involves you as a person. And it's not all about computers, and it can be. Computers can really help facilitate things, and so can technology machines. But I want it to be as human as possible. I want people to think that, like, I measure things according to my own body, like my hand, my arm, the width of my shoulders, and I make garments that are very long, that are as long as a room, that I have to measure in strides and jumps and footsteps and things like that. And so throwing in out of the window normal ways of measuring millimeters, centimeters, inches, whatever system you want to use. And so I want people to understand that it's a physical activity, it's a doing thing. And I really just want to explore as many ways of making creative garments and communicating design to people in different countries and different places.
So you're not going to give me any sort of specific
well, you want tangible
thinking.
Thing.
Not really specific,
okay.
but where
I'd like to show in London Fashion Week.
You'd like to show?
This September coming. Whether that happens, an exhibition or show of some sort. But I really want to. The act of touring, because I do this sort of touring and being quite nomadic as a designer and showing my work and teaching it to people in different places. We make collections, and out of that process I find new designs. But those designs are done live in front of an audience, and so I want to try and create this collection that has been made in different countries around the world, different places, and then I bring it to one place that's a fashion week. Maybe it's London Fashion Week, maybe it's New York Fashion Week, maybe it's Paris. Paris would be my absolute ideal. And I show a collection it's just not how other designers usually make their collections. They usually are static. They do it in an atelier somewhere, and it's usually situated in the city that they're showing in. I want to do something that's made on the road that is then brought to one of those cities and shown, but then is taken to other places too to be exhibited. that's my kind of ideal. Is this is like this on-the-go way of designing and showing that doesn't have to stick to this sort of trodden pathway of quite boring New York, London, Paris, Milan, Tokyo. There are lots of places outside of those zones that have really fascinating things going on, and I want to be feeding off that and learning from it, and also teaching at those places and passing on a little bit of fire and enthusiasm, if I can, to the people who are there. So
when you describe that, I sort of picture you like on a rail car with like a sewing machine or something.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. I mean, I have a suitcase that is. I have a suitcase with cutting things that is never unpacked, and it's one of those sort of like wheelie suitcases, and it's got my essential kit for cutting in. And I know it's always ready to go, and I just chuck certain garments into it that I'm going to wear, and I'll go off and I'll do my cutting, whether it's up and down the UK or abroad. And I quite love it. I like that idea of living out of a suitcase and not having, I don't need loads of possessions around me, and I'm not a particularly materialistic person. I would like to extend this into an actual collection. Like, I always do women's wear, but I'd love to do a menswear collection, which is actually the garments that I take with me when I'm on the road or when I'm going to different places, so that I'm actually wearing things that I've made myself. And it's almost like I would like to make something that's actually comfortable and a bit like a kind of work suit that maybe a fine artist or a painter might wear, like a jumpsuit or some sort of thing like that, that would be a useful thing for me to design and it'd be practical. And so I'm thinking about designing something like this and putting together a little suitcase of clothes that is a menswear line that is my practical range that I want to take to wherever I go to show off my cutting that I do. And that might become a little spin-off that is available as a commercial little range, little menswear label. There's a little goal for you. Because when you're travelling, you realise what time is in a different way, and so and you have to wait around at airports, and there's a sort of discomfort to it. And so you try and make it as easy as possible, and you streamline everything. It's the same if I go and do lots of demonstrations in places. I carry around with me certain tools for cutting and making things, and I would like to design a range of them as well that is actually more suited to what I'm doing, rather than relying on other people's rulers, tape measures, that sort of thing. And so eventually I'd like to get a point where whatever I'm carrying around with me is actually something that I purely design myself, whether it's the garments I wear, the bag I'm carrying, or the tools that I use to actually make and show the collections I'm creating. And then I'll be kind of like I don't know, some sort of like weird artist figure, I guess, that's some sort of strange Andy Warhol or someone who's got a portable factory where I'm kind of like just going around the place making and showing things and creating collections as I go. It all relies on mobility, though, so I need my legs and I need public transport.
Absolutely. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, what are you up to? How are you doing? And
what am I up to?
How are you finding illustrating it?
Illustration it's a lot of fun. I mean, I find that as, professionally, I have a love-hate relationship with it. It's, and...
Did you always want to be an illustrator, or
no.
did you... No.
No. I mean, I always illustrated, and
It's what worked for you. Because I guess subtraction cutting is what has worked for me.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily what I want to do all the time, It's something you can get you can get trapped in it, and so maybe... That I have a bit of a love-hate thing with the cutting side of things sometimes, but...
Yeah, I guess it's sort of the same thing. It is the thing that I've sort of managed to turn into, a modest little career for myself. Mm. The thing that my ego is really invested in is the blog.
Yeah.
And, more and more I've been able to get a little bit of sponsorship on the blog.
That's a really interesting area, because the whole blog thing is so new, and it's a real new territory, and... There are no rules that say what works, what doesn't work, and it's it's a pioneer field to be in, and so it's still kind of. I don't know whether people will look back in 20 years and say, oh yeah, what will people say about blogs and about this way of communicating? It's quite a unique area, so.
I look back 3 years when you first met me, and it was a completely different world back then, Julian. It's just crazy, especially the past year, how much the whole medium has transformed. And there's this whole sort of upward lifting sort of feeling in the fashion blog land out there, where people are trying to figure out, what is a professional fashion blog, and how do you make a living from a fashion blog, and all of these sort of things. I mean, the thing that I love about it is that when I'm successful at getting a certain level of sponsorship for the blog, it gives me a lot more freedom to explore things, which is freedom, and all of a sudden I find myself faced with these sort of, blocks of time, which, I have solely to just make the blog something that is lively and full of, things that people find exciting and stuff like that. And I find myself vacillating between absolute, being inspired and excited, and this horrible feeling of ennui where I feel like I'm just about to do it wrong. So
that's why I had to kind of call a time on my website and make it a 1 day a week thing.
Yeah.
But even that sometimes seems like Wednesday comes around, because it's only I do it every Wednesday. It comes around so quickly, and I can sometimes feel like I'm a slave to having to like blog stuff and to get stuff out. I mean, it's quite nice because it kind of, on the other hand, because it kind of like punctuates your life, and you know that every Wednesday you're doing a certain thing. But sometimes it takes a lot of energy to get this stuff out all the time online, and it's a really sort of like, you just never know what its effect will be and where it's going to go in, say, 5 years' time from here, and it's a very sort of new territory to be in.
Yeah, and you're defining your own parameters. But the thing that I've always desired to be, I've always felt passionate about writing. And reading, and I, when I say that I'm looking for my thing, and the illustration doesn't seem like it's my thing.
Would you like to write factual stuff, or would you like to write a novel?
Both.
Or films?
Or preferably some mix of both. I'm sort of happy that, I'm going to have the opportunity to do something with subtraction cutting, and that it seems to me that lately a lot of sort of information has been filtering through to me, which has been very much saying me, do it without thinking. Do it. Action is required.
Yeah.
It's about movement. It's about doing things. Because
you might personally find, like, when I come to do this at Rice, and you may find it slightly slow, because I'm going to be teaching it to people who might not know as much about it as you do, because you've been following it for some time, and kind of like you've tried parts of it out before already. And I'm hoping that I want to find a way to kind of like keep your particular interest, as well as holding the interest of people who've never tried it before, because it can work on both levels. If you know nothing about it, you can just learn. It's great. But if you're an expert and you've tried it many times, or you have an understanding of it, it can be pushed in a different direction. So I might have to kind of like shove you into different aspect of subtraction cutting.
Well, certainly, by all means, push me, but don't stress out about it.
Hey, I ain't, and I'm not going to, and I'm not going to expect great things. It's like the thing about it is that you don't know what the outcomes are, and that's nice, because it's nice and almost democratic in that sometimes the people who are the lowest in the class do the best things, and the people who are the high flyers, their stuff doesn't turn out quite so good, and it can turn a group upside down from who's the talented ones and who are the not talented ones. And I like that, because sometimes people need to be given a chance, who are just for everyone to be on the sort of same level. And so
isn't it fun to defy expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got like loads we can talk about like when we actually meet. I was worried that we'd have nothing to talk about when we actually meet in person, but I think there's loads more I want to know about you, and there's, obviously when I come there I'm going to be talking my socks off, talking about what's this thing called subtraction cutting, but just on a personal level, I think I'm really interested in on you finding your thing, and I'm interested in the way that you blog and the way you illustrate, and I very much appreciate the way that you've helped and supported me through my process of becoming a subtraction cutting guru.
Well, yeah, you're most welcome. And I gotta say, it's all thanks to the internet.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. You can't talk it down.
No, for sure. Okay, so thank you very much for speaking.
Yeah, and yourself. Take good care, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you soon.